Hello, everybody. So, today we are going to dive deep into the journey of Aditya Khanna, who is a PhD researcher in mathematics at Virginia Tech. And you can find his bio in the description. So, let's go. Okay, so for anybody who does not know, Aditya was also my high school senior, and we always heard about him that he's too good with physics and maths. And the next thing you know that he was doing is doing a PhD in mathematics. And Aditya, I'm actually very curious to know, that
hmm
about your journey from school, like when you passed out school, till this time to the researcher that you are. Like, what told you inside, from inside, or maybe what made you realize that you had a penchant for research? What was that?
Yeah, as you said, right, it wasn't really much of a choice because that seemed to be how I was as a student. I was raised in a household which was, my mom was a science teacher. Uh, and so it was very much keep asking questions. And if you are asking questions, we will try to answer it, talk to each other. And I'm just, annoying my mom in the kitchen. Uh, so it was encouraged. And I think that made my choice much easier. So, in that sense, I'm very privileged, right? My parents never really stopped me from pursuing any sort of research.
Oh,
And then one of my major influences was at that time YouTube, because a lot of school math was, you know how school math is, how we are
yeah.
taught math. Uh, and so I got to see a lot of things which were like, oh, this is extremely cool. I have never seen anything like this. Nobody has ever talked to me about this, but I enjoy it. So initially, I wanted to do, okay, I was like, maybe I want to do math. Mathematician is a new career that has been now unlocked for me.
Yeah.
I told my parents, they didn't know what it is. I don't think anybody generally has any idea what a mathematician does, which is something I wish to improve on. But they were like, oh, so why don't you do physics, which is sort of related to mathematics? If you do math, you will have to leave physics. But if you do physics, you will continue doing math. I was like, that completely makes sense because I was in school. I didn't know if that made sense or not. Then I went to college. I went to IISER Pune. I went to IISER Pune wanting to do physics.
Mm.
My first semester mathematics course was called Introduction to Proofs.
Okay.
It is a very common course across institutes. Uh, but the best thing about that course is it's not fixed pedagogically. If you're taught calculus, if you're taught, for example, basic topology, even in biology, if you're taught like cell biology, there is a structure to it, right? You're introduced to things in a very step by step way.
Yeah.
But introduction to proofs, because it's such a free course, you the teacher can teach in whichever way they want.
Okay.
So my professor had these notes which were like super fun, and all of them had one activity. So we would go to like tutorials and we would do some sort of activity. One of them is like, race to 100. I
Yeah.
say a number and you can add at most 10 to that number.
Okay.
And so we play this, and then whoever gets first to 100 wins. And then the thing was, oh, strategize. How do you make a strategy so
Okay.
that you always win? And then there is, they gave you strings, and then you have to make these strings and make sure you don't make a triangle with those strings.
Yeah.
All of these very mathematical ideas in form of games, and that just clicked with me. And so I later did a project with that guy, summer project. And that summer project introduced me to the topic that I am basically studying till today. And after that it's just,
I mean, really.
yeah,
So
everything's
basically,
working.
something you did in your master's, you actually carried it forward and you're doing it now in your PhD.
I did it. I did it in my first year of undergrad, not master's. So when I
Oh,
was,
okay.
yeah, yeah. So first year of my college.
Wow. I mean, so you
Yeah,
developed the passion for your subject since then, like when you were maybe 18.
I got lucky. I'm a very small privileged section who actually found out what they like very early on. So
Wow.
yeah.
And then you always knew that the only way to pursue what you like is PhD, or were there other ways to pursue what you like?
That is a good question. I now know that a very good way to pursue what I like is actually doing a degree in computer science, because a lot of people have computer science adjacent interest to combinatorics. But of course, I didn't know during that time. And it seems like no matter what I want to do with my life, ended up going through a PhD route. Even
Okay.
like doing an industry job related to my stuff sort of needs a PhD, because if you get a PhD, it just opens so many more doors.
Yeah.
And of course, my interest is very research focused, right? I love the community I'm part of.
Yeah.
I basically get paid to think about the stuff I want to think about. So, it is nice in that sense. And yeah, so PhD ended up being one of the only ways I could carry forward with this passion.
Yeah. Okay. And then you always knew that you wanted to do it abroad, or you wanted to pursue it in India, because, of course, being in India,
Mhm,
you live closer to your family, right? And I mean, or you were always focused upon that you want to move to US and always US was in
mhm.
focus, or what was the case that time?
Yeah, the primary thing that also my parents have focused on throughout my whole life is getting exposure. That's why I didn't do my undergrad in Delhi or near my family, because, I would head out. But they also were like, oh, you're too young to actually head out too far. So you should act not go to the US when in undergrad. You can do it later. And that exposure has probably been one of my main driving reasons for why I want to go outside the country, just explore. Uh, Introduces you to new cultures, very important. Because any sort of, like, if you spend too much time in a given place, and especially, in something with mathematics, it rewards risk taking. Any science rewards risk taking, and yeah, like, trying new ideas. Because I know I'm going to fail 90% of the time. And going to a different country is probably within the same program of understanding, right? I want to go out, I want to try new things, because I know if I am in a single place, I would probably have a very limited perspective.
Okay.
That is one of the main reasons why I wanted to go out. Secondly, as I learned in my particular field, not a lot of people do what I want to do, and they were people I already knew.
Okay.
So even if I do work with them, that's not really expanding how many people I interact with.
Okay.
Uh, India is good. It has only recently started having conferences. The US has so many conferences. And so if you want to meet people, if you like meeting people, conferences. Like I went to like two conferences in a semester sometimes. So you get to meet a lot of people. That's important. And my advice here is someone who completely has a similar research philosophy with me, has similar research interests. And so in that sense, it's been going really well. So the US thing worked out for me. I'd apply to Europe, I would apply to other places, but at the end, this is what worked out.
Okay. And okay, so when you moved to US, like, straight from an Indian culture to the US culture, did you have like a cultural shock
Mhm.
over there?
Generally, coming from uh, an upper echelon of being in Delhi, having a lot of privileges, going to IISc Pune where everybody was also privileged, I have always been sort of encased in this culture that is related to, of course, a lot of, Indian influences. There's obviously, but there's also a really strong foreign influence, which is often American, through
Okay.
shows, through how we talk to each other, through references, memes, and all of that stuff. There's so much American influence that you already know a good deal about the country before going there.
And also, when you decided that, okay, I want to do a PhD and you were moving to US, did you ever think of, like, I don't know if, that is in your, that is valid, this question is valid to ask for a field like mathematics, but still I'm going to ask.
Mhm.
So, did you ever think
Mhm.
of doing a PhD in industry?
Yeah, that is a very valid question. I think about that a lot for obvious reasons because, when you're doing a PhD, you're not getting that much money. And then every time you look at your money, you're like, it would be greater if I had another zero at the end of this, or
Okay.
maybe two, right? Uh, so it is harder with respect to what I chose. I could have probably chosen to do like a computer science thing,
Mhm.
and that would have led through a PhD in a industry PhD. But what I wanted would not have been sufficient.
Okay.
So an industry PhD probably wouldn't have worked out for me. So I did want an academic atmosphere. I did want to like specifically focus on these very non-applied problems.
Yeah.
And this, yeah, and it's very hard to find that in the industry.
Yeah. I mean, industry, I think, has very little potential for exploration, and it's more in the way of you do
Hmm.
what you can sell, basically. You do what you sell.
Yeah, I do have a couple of friends in combinatorics adjacent fields who have industry ties and they're basically being funded by industry, but they do very specific stuff. Like one person was working on this thing called like tropical geometry, and it has applications to optimization.
Okay.
So, you know, there is combinatorics over there, so it's relevant to what I do. And for your viewers who don't know what uh, combinatorics is the study of counting stuff basically. But imagine if you're counting some stuff inside, how many dots are there inside this box? And that can lead to questions about volumes, that can lead to questions about how something moves over time, right? And those are the sort of questions you're asking when you want to optimize something.
Ah, okay.
Uh, if you've ever done, there's a thing called linear programming. If you remember what linear programming is, it is also related. Uh, yeah, so point being, I could have had, but I've had to like, go a couple of steps in a different direction to actually think
Yeah.
about doing an industry PhD.
Okay, so basically I we can sum it up this way that if you want like more of a financial stability during your PhD years, you should go for industry. But then again, it is very hard to find. It's not very easy to find in what you want to do.
Yeah, yeah, you could probably just go for an industry job, and I think that has more doors open.
Yeah, because
Like straight, like a
yeah.
finance job, definitely more options than PhD.
Okay, so like if you want to switch to industry now after your PhD,
Mhm.
you will find the
Mhm.
transition harder than people already, of course, working in the industry or did their PhD there, and the transition will be quite smooth for them. And for the person who is
Very true.
yeah, might be like harder, right?
Completely. Yeah, but yeah, definitely true. I know a few people who have switched from kind of the stuff what I did and gone into industry, like a completely different job. One person is doing some policy data analysis stuff.
After PhD in industry.
So, so she did PhD basically here in my field.
Okay.
Went to do like teaching for a few years and
Mhm.
then did this.
Okay.
So, like,
Yeah.
10 years into the future, still a possibility. Then somebody did data analytics for like a company, completely different from what that person does in research.
Okay.
So, apparently, it's possible.
So at the end,
Yeah.
PhD just opened doors. A lot of them.
Yeah,
Okay. That
that's
sounds,
what it feels like.
you know, yeah, I mean there is always that potential for a lot of uncertainty when you're doing a PhD. I think so.
Yeah, yeah, I do agree. Um, so it gives you a good amount of time to think about what you want to do in the future.
Yeah. And also, like when you started your PhD, when you were in you just entered US and you were in your first year.
When I
So
was a baby, true.
you might have looked like a baby that time because out a
Yeah.
master's pressure, like we all are when we just leave college. And then, when you enter your lab, you have everybody around you who knows so much more than you. And, a lot of
Hmm.
people say that they get something which is called imposter and they feel inferior.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel that way when you entered?
I was at ISO Pune, so I got really lucky in
Yeah.
that everybody around me was already better than me. So
Okay.
I got that hit of imposter syndrome in like my first 2 years of undergrad, uh, which was, a horrible experience mentally, uh, because you have to deal with, I was so good in school, but now everybody here is just doing better than me. And how do I reconcile that with what I am? But eventually, what worked out for me is one, realizing that no matter how good other people are, what is specifically you is hard to find in other people, right? We are all these multidimensional beings, and whenever we are thinking about imposter syndrome, most often we are taking like one axis along which we are comparing. And you're like, oh, this person's better than me, and now I feel bad. But if you were to compare them with another axis, you would see that you are doing better than them. And at the end of the day, right, this comparison is such a how you like what metric you are comparing yourself on matters in how you mentally deal with a situation. And so my favorite book is The Little Prince.
Hmm.
If you have never read The Little Prince, it's an invitation to do so. One important thing that is in there is, so Little Prince has a rose at home, on his planet. And then he go comes to Earth, sees like a whole hedge just filled with roses. According to him, there is only one rose in the whole universe. But now he has come to planet Earth, sees there are roses everywhere. And now he has to reconcile this idea. And the resolution for him is that his rose is his own,
Okay.
right? All of these are definitely roses. Probably some are prettier than his rose, but his rose is his own because his rose is the one who talks to him. His rose is the one who he has cared for.
Yeah.
And I think that is where my resolution of imposter syndrome also came from, because not everybody's, doing math. Not everybody's doing what problem I'm doing. Not everybody is you, maybe, doing YouTube stuff, or some part of me is not what other people are. And that is the important thing, right? All of us have our own things, our own roses, which are important to us, and other people have their own. And at the end of the day, this diversity is what we need. And imposter syndrome is when we are not appreciating the diversity, but rather thinking, oh, comparing with them, which is this is my resolution. Not everybody has to. This is probably not many people's resolutions, which is completely fine. But eventually, this is what I learned. It
Yeah.
is, of course, still hard, right? If I see someone who is doing better at research than me, I'm still a little bit stings a little bit, but not as bad as, oh, I'm bad, I should probably leave the field. Not that level. But it gets better over time. At least it didn't hit me in my first year of PhD because it hit me in my first year of undergrad. I saw people who were affected by this in the first year of their PhD because they spent all of their undergrad being the good students.
Yeah.
And so, which is way worse because I think a PhD is much harder.
Yeah.
You're like a full adult, you have to make your own food, pay bills, and deal with this. So, yeah. So, yeah,
Mean,
that's my
it was
whole.
A very
understanding.
beautiful line that you said. It's a very beautiful message that your rose is your own and you need to nurture it without comparing it to
Hmm.
the other roses present. I mean, that's beautiful. And
Yeah.
when you like started your PhD, okay, so I want to know this and did you actually weigh the pros and the cons when you just were too resolute that, okay, I'm doing this and we're doing this? So, were there any
Hmm.
second thought in your mind, even in your first year or when you started it, that, okay, it's a relationship where I can't have a breakup. I have to complete it, and it's a 5 year long journey, and it's a long commitment. It's pretty long commitment.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
was there second thoughts in your mind in your first year that maybe I have taken a wrong decision, or I don't know? And because it's like 5 years, people move a lot ahead than you. We are still there doing this research and publishing papers, or in the race of publishing papers. And like, how was it for you?
Yeah. I think part of it does tie back to our imposter syndrome conversation, right? Where depends on like some axes such as, people getting married, having children, doing jobs. I don't even have anything towards that axis that I can't even compare. So I'm like, oh, I don't even maybe want it in my life. And so that part of comparison goes away for me, which, works in this particular scenario. But I would say second thoughts are human nature.
Yeah.
Uh, when applying for a PhD, I was probably having lesser second thoughts because one, uh, it felt like the correct move. I had weighed the relative pros and cons, and PhD would have only granted me anything that I would have, as we talked about, it would have opened more doors. But the other option, of course, would have been to probably take a job. And I would have always maybe felt throughout my whole life that, damn, I should have done a PhD,
Yeah.
right? So in that way, it is very hard to know because as a person who has dealt with regrets, no matter what I do, it feels like regret, like regret is not a result of choice or decision. Because if, if later you're like, oh, maybe I should have done this, that seems more fantastical rather than actually being a regret,
Yeah.
right? So in that sense, I had weighed the pros and cons before I started. And what I chose worked out really well for me. At least, on the research side, I think it is probably the best decision I would could have made. Again, I have no means to compare it to anything. I don't know. Maybe there's a timeline out there where there's an even better decision, but research-wise, it worked out for me. As a PhD, it worked out. There's also, a part of me which is like, if I tell my younger self I did this, my younger self will be like, oh, this is the coolest thing in existence. So
Yeah.
there's that. Uh, there's no singular perspective. Right, depends on which perspective you pick. It can either be a pro or a con. It can either be a regret or a thing that you really like.
Yeah.
Uh, I think my perspective here is, this is something that I've always wanted to do. Uh, I, a part of me coming to the US was also, my favorite band does concerts here,
Yeah.
and I got to watch them. I was genuinely, when I was, in undergrad, I was thinking maybe I'll never get to see them. And so I think all of these factors play a role that in building a checklist, and you're like, okay, I did this, I did this, I did this. Is this a good thing for my future? I don't know. Because I will never know that unless the future becomes a present and then you reflect back, right? So it's a harder question for me to answer. I am very short-sighted as a human being. I
Okay.
don't have super long-term plans.
Okay.
So there are some people, who are like, oh, I am trying to move my life in this direction. That couldn't be me.
I really want to ask you that, when people start PhD, they start with a lot of passion, a lot of zeal, a lot of like, we'll make
Like it's
something up.
500 papers.
Yes. And when they're defending or when they're just near, that finishing line, they just want to finish it,
Hmm.
either with quality or without quality. Then it just becomes a degree that you
Yeah.
take and just get over with. So,
Hmm.
did you feel that change in your passion? Or you have seen like a graph which is constant?
Absolutely wonderful question. This is probably more reflective of our society than an individual thing. Wow, I have a lot of thoughts about this. So one, your passion over time is extremely dependent on your atmosphere, which includes your advisors, your friends, your university. And I don't think a lot of people who lose their passion lose it because of the things they have control over. If you have an advisor that overworks you, if you have a culture that is overworking you, that is key in you losing your passion. Yeah, so that I think is, one of the major reasons as to why people are losing their passion. Uh, I very controversial. I, I don't believe in passion per se, right? I think there is an interest, uh, which, you could be like, okay, interest probably just a different word for passion, but my interests over time have held on to things. I have mostly liked doing the things I have liked doing for a long time. And there are some things which I do for some time, then I don't do, but a few things have continued with me. So, like even for hobbies, right? Some hobbies I've had since my school days. Uh, so in that sense, it's harder for me to figure out if my passion or interest has continued because of my personality traits, or, maybe it is also better in math. In biology, if you go on the Reddit or if you just talk to your friends in biology, you know this way better than I do. But talk to my friends, they're like, oh, my friends, they have been working in lab till 12 a.m. and now they're tired. And all of that will weigh on you over time. Math doesn't have those sort of time restrictions.
Yeah.
So I get to basically work from home, which
Yeah.
is, a good thing and a bad thing that you can decide. So that flexibility
Yeah.
offers me. So what do you think is a good number of hours per day to work on
I,
your research?
mm, there is no good number of hours that I have realized.
Hmm.
1 year into my PhD, I'm a computational biologist and I do like maybe
Yeah.
20 wet lab, but I have seen people doing wet lab on days when on days they are just so free, they don't have anything. And on days they are so busy, they don't even have the time to eat. So maybe 12 hours are also less for them. And on some days, they'll be just
Oh,
home and they'll just work for an hour. It actually depends on the
hmm.
techniques, on your cells, and all that stuff. So I think that, in
Yeah.
biology, there is no standard for good number of working hours.
There's no standard.
There is no standard.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's no stand. I think this is one of the reasons why people burn out uh, and just lose interest is because everything comes back to work-life balance.
Yeah.
Uh, so if the goal that people set, like, it's like the folklore, it's
Yeah.
like you should work 4 hours a day if you're doing a PhD, right? Which is such a which is considered, 4 hour day is technically half, or
Yeah.
4 hours a day when you're a career mathematician. So that is like, and as an actual career, you should work 4 hours a day and only on weekdays. So that's like 5 hours,
20
five
hours a
days. So that's like apparently. Also, which makes sense in math because I can't really set up an experiment
Yeah.
and be like, okay, that counts as my work, right? It has to be continuous thought, which can be tiring. So in that sense, I think that's a good thing to aim for. But because of these flexible working hours, uh, people just probably burn out. I I've gotten a little bit better at this. So recently I did like a bunch of work in like a month. Then I told my advisor, you know, I have sent you all of these documents. Uh, it was so many documents. He could not keep up with it. So I'm like, I've sent you all of these documents. I am taking a break for a week. So I just went and visited my friend, did not do any work.
Now, you have actually stumbled upon a very important point that I was actually going to bring up. Actually, two important points.
Hmm.
First of all,
Hmm.
there is I don't know now, I can't really define it as a myth or a fact. Okay, so I want to ask you.
Okay.
Work,
I love misinformation.
work-life
I love.
balance is in PhD, or I would say work-life
Uh-huh.
and PhD or research go hand in hand. I don't know
Hmm.
it's a myth or a fact. Maybe it depends upon the field that you are in, right? And the second
Right.
question that I want to ask you is that how do you actually choose your supervisor? What were the points? Like, that, okay, this supervisor is good, and I would like to pursue my research or my PhD under this person. And because,
Hmm.
it is very much related to the fact that you did not burn out and held on to your passion, your interest, and are still
Yeah.
very much eager to know new things because you have a good advisor, like you just mentioned. So, what did you actually see?
Hmm.
I want to know about these two things.
Okay. Okay. I would answer the second question first because I think that's more straightforward for me. Uh, so while searching my advisor, I was looking at universities. I was applying to universities when I was doing my master's thesis. And my, so in my work, I have these objects it's called an abacus. You move stuff around, you know what an abacus looks like. It's basically that. You move stuff around it and you can prove things using that, right? So I was using it for a very different thing. And I
Hmm.
was just looking up papers. Uh, so I was going around reading up some papers. I saw that this special paper that was using this abacus thing, which I was using for a very different reason, to prove some things which are like very famous. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know these things could be related. And so I read the paper. I mean, of course, I didn't read the paper. I don't think would have understood it. I read, the introduction to the paper and I was like, oh, that's cool. And that person is my current advisor. So my advice to people whenever they ask me about finding supervisors, when you're applying to a university, when you're in a university, I think then you just go talk to them, right? Just, okay. If I really have to answer that, when you are in a university, talk to people who
Yeah.
have been students under that person.
Yeah.
Uh, Very importantly, if you have taken a course under that person, that is one of the best things because in a course, you see a person's personality really well on display. If you have office hours with them, go to office hours with them. That is basically what your meetings would look like.
Okay.
So, uh, when you're in a university, talk to your professors, talk to students who have been with them, and interact with those professors. And this would 90% of the time tell you who you want to work with.
Okay.
But if you're applying to universities, in that case, if you have a field, you know, that is that involves some sort of reading, the papers that you look at, apply to people who have written papers similar to what you're interested in. And when you're doing that, probably write them an email. My
Yeah.
supervisor literally told me recently that one of the reasons he accepted me is because I wrote an email to him. And my email was, legitimate. That I actually mentioned, oh, I had read your paper. I like this part. Maybe we could do this. Right? It was, and I think that is a good email. Introduce yourself,
Yeah.
tell how you know them, and put a small thing about, maybe if any ideas you have. And because most people who send out emails send out like very boilerplate stuff. Hello, I am this guy, and they are like, oh, I like your work, without even mentioning. And
Yeah.
sometimes, oh my God, some professors get email without the name changed. So somebody sending an email to multiple professors, but it's like, dear doctor, wrong person.
I
So
would report
please
that
don't do that.
email.
Honestly, probably some people maybe do that. Probably just send them to their spam folder or something. Yeah, so that is how I found my supervisor.
Okay.
And if, and of course, talking to your current university's professors and being like, do you have collaborators?
Yeah.
Do those collaborators have collaborators? Are there any papers that you have read, which are,
Yeah. Yeah.
another small thing, which I don't know how, another small thing is if you're reading their paper, I don't know if it applies to biology, but in math, look at how the paper is written.
Okay.
If the paper is easy to read, that is a good indication that the person you are working with might also focus more on, you know, being clearer in their exposition.
Okay.
So, because most of the time, how people are going to teach you what they know, how people are going to discuss with you in meetings, that is also tied to how they write papers. Uh, if the paper has clear exposition, it is correlated to having a more expositionary personality in general, and you're likely to learn better from them. Again, some people who are, great personalities IRL might not write the best papers, but this is something that you could look for. A well-written paper probably means they are a good person to interact with.
I mean,
This has been my rough experience.
I never thought that way, but that's quite an interesting point to actually, look at the way things are written. I mean,
Hmm.
in biology per se, I cannot really use this kind of indication because
Yeah.
you cannot write a protocol in a very simple,
Hmm.
because you have to be so much, you have to put in so much details that it is reproducible by the other person.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I mean,
Yeah.
so you have to go into the detail, mention the complex things that you have. I mean, maybe for the
Hmm.
computational biology, it could be that way because you can always have your supplementary files over there and mention everything that you have done, or put the code on
Hmm.
GitHub
Hmm.
and make the paper more simple. But when it
Hmm.
comes to the bench scientist, men are they underappreciated for the details. Yes, they are.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm. Hmm. Completely true. Yeah, maybe or like just the introduction. Like if we forget the details, maybe the introduction is like,
Yeah.
fun.
I mean, you can always know, I think when it comes to biology, you can always know this from their references. That's a,
Mm,
to what kind of research these people always refer to. Because when you go to higher journals like Nature or Cell,
right.
it's always
Hmm.
harder to read those papers because there's so much detail. It is also difficult to submit papers in those journals. They take like
Yeah.
5 years to review and take your paper over there. But I think if you see their references and they have presented something from that particular kind of journal in a simpler
Hmm.
and a more understandable or a more comprehensible manner,
Right.
then I would take it.
Right.
Or maybe they have changed their protocols and done something quite cool or quite fascinating after like hundreds of failed experiments, but still were able to do something.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would, okay, there's something, they're doing something really cool, and maybe I want to know what they are doing.
Yeah.
Because for me, I chose my current supervisor because I already had the project. I already interviewed with the project in my hand.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, yeah.
I was fascinated more by the techniques they use than by the biology they do.
Mm.
Biology will always change. The techniques are something that you know, you gain
That
that.
is fine. Yeah.
So that was
That's
my.
true.
Okay, so coming back to the first question, I am actually excited to
Back
hear.
to work-life balance.
Yes.
Okay. So the question exactly being the role of work-life balance in research, or am
No.
I misunderstanding?
So there is a myth about I don't know it's a myth or a fact. You will tell me that it's a thing
Okay.
that say that PhD and work-life balance don't go hand in hand, and it can be completely
Don't go hand in hand. Okay.
go hand in hand, and the scientists
Mm.
or the researchers do not have a social life, or they have a very they have already sacrificed their social life because they're always working,
Uh-huh.
working, and also their personal life is affected. We can say that because they get to spend less
Okay. I see. I see.
their loved
100%. Yeah.
ones. And
Hmm.
what will you say about that?
Oh boy. This again, extremely individual based, right?
Okay.
Some people have struggles in their lives which I haven't faced at all. First of all, uh, we should probably define what work-life balance is.
Work
Uh,
is
I
like
think,
you work 5 hours, 8 hours, five
mhm.
hours. Go home.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about work. Okay. Probably
Okay.
the last day you will go the next day at exact the same time and you will work exactly the number of same hours and come back. Okay. And you don't have
Ah.
and and I also think a major part of work-life balance is also if you're working extra number of hours, you are rewarded.
Hmm.
You are also rewarded. That okay, today you
Okay. I see.
did 4 hours of extra
Overtime.
and you are rewarded for that. I think that also comes in work-life balance that you are being rewarded for the extra number of hours or extra effort that you are.
Mm.
So, work-life balance, people say it very it's a kind of an umbrella term, work-life balance, but it also
Yeah.
everything, being rewarded, having your loved ones near you, or you are able to be take care of your loved ones and have the flexibility in the work. So people say it in very
Hmm.
umbrella term, work life balance, but then this all comes under it. So what do you think about it?
I do agree with that. I think it's yeah, it is too broad of a term.
Yeah.
And I do like your interpretation, right? It's a very 9 to 5 sort of interpretation. Uh, PhD, as we did talk about, it comes with a lack of, no, it comes with flexibility.
Yeah.
And that flexibility can be a boon or an absolutely horrible nightmare for you, depending on honestly every factor about you, right? It could be personality, it could be what you are dealing with at that time. Uh, in a sense of having proper working hours, I don't know if that is possible.
Yeah.
So, at least in math, right? Uh, you could probably sit down and start working,
Yeah.
but there is much lesser control over when good ideas come to you,
Yeah.
right? If an idea is coming to me at night, maybe I could have a better think of, I write it down, I think of it tomorrow. That are probably good work-life balance now that I think about it. But sometimes you could just be wasting a whole day.
Yeah.
And for me, what has worked, again, all of this will come in the future. Right now, I don't know if it's work-life balance. Maybe what I'm doing right now is absolutely horrible and will come to bite me in 5 years. Who knows? But right now, my measure is what my mathematical productivity is, right? It could be how much I am working, how much you could do it like papers, whatever you want to measure, right? But I feel in that sense, I am being productive. And my work-life balance looks like, do I want to work right now?
Okay. Makes sense.
If I don't feel like working right now, I will. not do that. And 2 or 3 days, if I don't work, I get an itch to start working.
Yeah.
And so in that case, it's never like, oh, I don't want to work and I have not worked for a month. But that could be a very much a personal thing. And like sometimes people do tell me how hard it is. Like when you are doing a PhD and you don't really have a particular concrete problem to work on, you can feel very lost. Um, and in that case, you can sometimes spend like a whole month not making progress in any particular direction. And that can be really demotivating.
Yeah.
Uh, but for me, because I do have very concrete problems, my thesis is a very
Yeah.
like a specific thing that I'm working on. It is easier for me to actually have an internal motivation to work. But if I were to do a normal work hour, fun hour type thing, I have never done that in my entire life. I'm not a schedule-based person.
Yeah.
I'm a task-based person. So I'll write down, oh, I have to do this, 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 and whatever I feel like I will do. So it's sort of like a menu. You pick whatever you feel like doing
Yeah.
at that time, and that works for me.
Oh,
Uh, I don't know if this is a thing you can do in labs because labs, like some of my friends have to go to labs at a time.
yes.
So yeah, right. Do you have that abroad?
I am from the lucky section of those people.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
so like come at 9 a.m. sort of
it's
labs.
it's more like time points. You have to do
Hmm.
that time point, even if it's 2 at night. You go and you do that. Doesn't matter if it's two.
Interesting. Yeah.
That is, I mean, I think that major difference actually comes out here that in biology for the bench scientists, and I'm very specifically talking about the bench scientists, their thing is very
Hmm.
point based, so they have to be in the lab. And I feel that,
Hmm.
the concept of flexibility does not exist because
Yeah.
it's like your cells need this to be done, and then you have to schedule your experiment
Hmm.
according to your cells. So your life actually
Oh
revolves
yeah,
experiments,
that's true.
cells, and the stuff.
That
So, yeah.
yeah.
And for them, it's always very difficult. Why? Because you have to always depend upon the availability of the material and the cell and the thing you're working.
Hmm.
So, as a computational biologist, I can run 10 different analyses at the same time and see which one works for me
Yeah.
without harming the
Yeah.
raw.
Mm.
For bench scientists, it is
Yeah,
not the
the material, I completely agree with that. Yeah, like if you set up an experiment and then you have to go in 12 hours. Yeah,
it's
right. Otherwise the cell will just die or something. Okay, that's true. But I don't have anything like that.
if we sum up this question, then I think I do agree with you that work-life balance, if I sum up under 3 words, is flexibility. You should actually
Hmm.
enjoy what you really do, and then you should just be in that mental health to manage stuff because at the end of the day,
Hmm.
work-life balance is actually not work and life balance, it's how you are balancing everything in your life while not being like,
Hmm.
you know, all done and destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That is such a good point. You're balancing everything in your life. Uh, I love that because that allows for, work and life to be generalized. Because work-life balance is, I don't think, a phrase that came through academia. It probably came through the corporates. I believe work-life balance is obligations versus wants. Like what I have to do in my life and what I want to do in my life. Now, there could be an intersection between these two. Like, for example, research, I want to do that, I have to do that. And there are some things that I really have to do. Like some days I don't want to cook, but I have to cook. And there are some things, I want to play video games, but I can't do that for 12 hours a day.
Yes.
So work-life balance is a balance of wants and haves.
Yes.
And yeah, so it's everything in your life.
I mean, actually, I am so happy to hear that answer from you about the work-life balance
Hmm.
and balancing research. Because these days I read so much on LinkedIn about people telling that
Hmm.
he has no work-life balance and other things. And for any person who is going to start it or is in the first year,
Yeah.
or just maybe starting it in a next month or so, it is very demotivating when I was going to start. Like I was going to start my PhD in like I started
Hmm.
November, and I read all these posts around, October, and I was like,
Oh
oh,
God, yeah. They
step
can
into,
break you.
and I was like,
Hmm.
is it really like that? And then I actually thought that, it's not just one single thing. It's totally connected to everything that
Hmm.
and how much you enjoy.
Completely agree. Yeah.
So I really am very happy and relieved to at least hear one person say that, yeah,
Yeah.
and I love it what I have, and thank you so
Hmm.
much for saying it. And really, I do mean it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, 100%. I do want to also say this is extremely individual, right?
Yes.
I This is a very personal, and there are some people who, even when they really want to try to work-life balance and, have a nice working life, they're just unable to do it because of a lot of factors.
Yes, I do.
So people can have super complex lives,
Yeah,
and I think it's hard to find.
yeah,
I don't want to use the word joy, but some level of contentment in what you're doing.
yes,
Sometimes the world just doesn't let you.
yeah,
I'm just lucky to have the world at least give me an opportunity to find contentment.
yeah. I actually like the fact that you are grateful for what you have because, as in when I think, this is so nice that I find that you have this thing. I mean, the best part was about that rose line that you told me, nurturing your own rose. But
It's The Little Prince, best
to
book.
here, this is actually about adoring what you have and having that kind of gratitude, which I think is very important
Hmm.
fact because it helps you value what you have. You are in that section of the
Oh
society
yeah, 100%.
who gets paid to do cool stuff, and nobody, questions you for making mistakes.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Completely forget this fact. We completely.
Oh yeah, very. Yeah, completely. I'm very privileged to what I have, and I think that's the whole point, right? When you have this level of opportunity and privilege, then you have to use it for other
Yeah,
things.
I mean, I can tell you this incident from work. Last week,
Hmm.
I did order something and it was not the correct thing. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I could not really get a significant result out of what I ordered. And it did cost a good amount of money. And I went to my
Okay.
and I told him, what was his reaction? Oh, it's okay, no problem. And I was like, but it was so expensive. And he was like, it's okay, don't worry, we can figure it out. He didn't question me or
Love
something
that.
because I was questioning myself. Like, what kind of a stupid person I am.
Hmm.
But then I think that, it is allowed to make mistakes in this setting, which I love
Yeah,
in academia, that you are allowed to make mistakes and explore yourself, I think, on a separate note.
that's true.
Now, specifically, I will also mention about USA because that is one of the countries investing majorly in this AI, artificial intelligence, right? And I heard somebody saying that, ChatGPT 5 will have a PhD level intelligence. And there was also tweet I read on X, Twitter, now X. I always call it Twitter. So
Twitter,
that
Twitter, it is Twitter. Yeah.
these LLMs will have PhD level intelligence. Google
Hmm.
just made like in the way of making like a self-learning algorithm, self-learning LLM that will
I see.
generate
Hmm.
the data, and then it will train itself on that data. Do you feel,
Right.
you know, first I have two questions actually. Any LLM
Yeah.
or any AI can have the intelligence a PhD has. Because in PhD, you just don't
Hmm.
go through a lot of personal and professional stuff together.
Yeah.
And secondly, do you feel that now it is harder to find a job because of the AI kicking in so fast? It's growing at an exponential.
Mm,
You see something new every day.
I see. Yeah. I think for the first question, I'm super unqualified to answer that.
Okay.
I didn't even predict AIs, right?
Okay.
I didn't predict LLMs. I didn't know how fast they would grow. If you had to ask me what I believe, I don't believe it at all. Because even right now, even when it knows things because it can directly pick up, for example, if you ask it to prove something that is done in courses, it can directly pick it up from someone and present it to you. Uh, it is really struggling with original research. And a lot of original research that is being done with. So Terence Tao has this whole thing about trying to do something original with generative AI, lots of inputs required.
Yeah.
Is it making the stuff faster? We don't really know because, PhDs are also extremely different sort of problems. What
Yes.
are we looking at? Everybody is working on a different thing.
Yeah.
Uh, so as of now, not even close.
Okay.
5 years into the future, what do I know?
Yes.
Maybe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. The way I think is so different from, like, my thinking is any sort of mathematical problem thinking is super non-linear.
Yeah.
And there are like pictures in my head. Does do LLMs have pictures in their head? We don't know that yet. Uh, right. It's so weird how the stuff in my brain gets transported
Yeah.
onto what I'm writing.
Yes.
And I don't know if the similar level of creativity has ever been documented.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But if I had to bet, I would say no.
Okay.
Uh, the second question about finding jobs, for me, again, no, because AI is pretty bad at math.
Okay.
For other people, AI is bad at math because humans are bad at math.
Yes.
Uh,
Selective ones
AI
are
is a very text-based. Huh?
selective ones are good.
Yeah. Uh, AI is, a text-based thing. So the LLMs are text-based, which means
Yeah.
the way they do math is not like they're actually doing literal math. It's harder for them to. LLMs have no concept of truth.
Yes.
Recently, we did a very funny thing with Gemini. We asked, is Delhi Belly an indie movie? It
Okay.
said yes. Then we said, is Delhi Belly not an indie movie? It said no.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's not an indie movie. So it's really funny because if the question really doesn't have an answer on the internet, it also doesn't really know what to do with it. And maybe, maybe there's something out there 5 years into the future. But as of now, as it stands, LLMs are bad at math. Those are the main AI tools we are using.
Yeah.
So my field is not at risk for a while.
Okay.
Other people, like animators, they have been fired.
Yeah.
So many of them, like people I know, just lost their jobs, right? Writing, I don't know, maybe like video game websites I recently heard are just pushing out AI written content. And I'm like, wow, what? So yeah, maybe those people lost their jobs. Like a company I know, for example, Polygon,
Yeah.
people just lost their job. I don't know, maybe coders, industry, probably happening. I can't tell you that. I don't have data. But in my field, very specifically, it's fine
Yeah.
as of now.
I mean, everybody knows that the fundings were slashed for research in USA. There was a big cut.
Hmm.
Did it
Yeah,
impact you? The first question that I have is this. Secondly, I want to really ask that, I mean, what was the level of the impact you felt, or maybe people around you felt? Because in LinkedIn, it was a very big hype, right? People were losing their jobs, getting fired. PhDs do not know that next month what are they doing or heading back to their own countries.
correct. Yeah.
What is your take on that? I mean, how did you feel about it?
Hmm. Yeah, so I was affected in a way that the conferences I want to go to, the fundings got canceled, so I couldn't do that. My funding comes mostly through tuition money in school, so we were not that affected. Uh, and my research is not funded per se, so I didn't feel anything with respect to that. There have been talks about cutting the department, like how many people they intake. Right, these are the stocks. But very specifically, I know that uh, some people who were working in health, right? So this person like works on eye stuff, like making improvements for blind people. And this person project got canceled with the statement that you are harming the health of American people. Like the absolute guts to say this to a person who's improving lives. Crazy. Uh, but that person didn't lose their job. They lost that project, but still a big thing. And then one person was like, who's Chinese, they said, I am teaching other people how to do my experiments because if my visa gets revoked, the experiments should continue. Uh, Horror stories, right? Nobody really in math, you know, maybe some parts of math, but around me, pretty fine. The department is not that affected, I would say. But in my like first or second step of friends, people have been facing.
So I do want to ask you that, I have heard this in USA, you have to continuously write grants to to have a secure funding for your project. So that really specifically
Mhm.
applies to the kind of funding you just mentioned, like, the graduate who are actually totally dependent upon this kind of funding and have no
Yeah.
tuition money coming in.
100%. Yeah. So whenever your professors write a grant, a part of it includes hiring.
Okay.
So in some cases that could be postdocs, in some cases that could be graduate students. Uh, in mathematics, that has been less affected. They're
Mhm.
mostly going for public health stuff. So that's why not a lot of math people who are on these research grants. And most of the math research grants are related to defense stuff, which, hasn't been that deeply affected.
Okay.
Some internships in defense got canceled,
Hmm.
but none of the, I don't think any of the grants have been affected.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, so it completely depends upon what kind of funding you were on and that actually determines the kind of impact you have now.
Yeah, that's mostly what it is. So what you are doing right now also determines how stable your
Okay, can you
current position is.
emphasize a bit more on this?
Yeah, for example, yeah, like because I'm teaching right now, I don't think I'm that concerned about where my money is coming from.
Okay, yeah.
Because at the end of the day, as long as there are students in the university, I'm probably okay.
Yeah.
And because my thing is like it's a math department who's doing engineering stuff, we teach engineers.
Hmm?
Uh, So engineering is also something that has not been affected that much.
Okay.
But if I was, very specifically at a medical institute teaching a particular course,
Yeah.
then we can imagine like probably something more would have happened. For example, medical institutes are the ones that have been extremely affected.
Yeah.
My friend is in a medical institute. Bad stories.
Okay. Yeah. So continuing on this, on the fact of the security part, I just also want to know, and I'm curious about this,
Mhm.
that when you talk about the security or, having a a good pay or the financial stability,
Yeah.
what do you think that, you want to change in your field that would
Hmm.
actually make it closer to having these non-negotiables?
Love that. Yeah, if I had the magic wand, let's see what I can wave it on. Primarily, right, of course. I am at a government institute, which puts me at a disadvantage. Because if you're in a private institute,
Hmm.
you can unionize better. And so people did that and they got massive raises, right? Some people are probably earning twice what I don't know, so probably some people are earning twice as much because of the union. The state where I am in,
Yeah.
you cannot. The unions are basically equivalent to resignation. So I will lose my job. That's not a good thing. And that makes sure the wages are low. So one of the things that I would really want is to have stronger graduate unions
Okay.
so that we can put our things forward and actually move them bureaucratically. And if you want good pay, it should be in the system to have good pay. But yeah, that's a hard thing to get. For math, I have not heard a lot of horror stories with advisors,
Yeah.
but in other fields, that's often the case. And so when you go to your advisor basically controls and decides what happens in your PhD.
Yeah.
Your advisor is the one central figure of your PhD, and they can completely destroy it if they wanted to. I
Yeah.
have not heard like anybody in math having that happen to them, but I would want to have stronger laws. I don't want to law. Stronger rules, at least within the university. Maybe the administration can take care of this. That the advisor isn't the most powerful figure. Like there should be some checks and balances, which I think are missing within universities. Uh, that's and maybe thirdly, finally, having some sort of job opportunities
Hmm.
which aren't just, oh, you have to be a professor, you have to be a researcher. Just introducing students to have introducing students to more job opportunities.
Okay.
PhDs are always within this academia bubble. And
Hmm.
if you want to go out, you have to make a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And just knowing what I can do, with my skill set,
Hmm.
like what is out there, just knowing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the few things that would really help take this stress off my head about what happens in the future.
So, I mean,
Otherwise, yeah.
yeah, no, no, please go on. Please go on.
Oh, I was gonna say otherwise, like currently the mathematical community and stuff that I'm a part of, I think it's pretty good.
Okay.
I even publishing in math is bad, but it's much better than other fields.
Yeah.
Uh, like, the review system is better. There is lesser publication, like need to have, we don't have authors, like we don't have author orderings. There is no concept of first author, second author, and so on. So everybody who's on a paper is on the paper,
That makes it so simpler.
which is it's so much more simple. It's great. It's very relieving. There is nothing like You know, you're not measuring how much work did I do, how much work did you do.
Yeah.
If I put this person, will I get a better, like, will it be more valuable? Will it look better? So those things aren't all there, you know. Of course, publishing takes really long. Nobody's being paid to review that.
Yeah.
So improving publishing is a thing I would want to do very globally.
Yeah.
I have no clue how to do that. I don't think I'm qualified enough to answer that.
And I want to,
Yeah.
okay, Aditya, like you have been in India in an institution like ICER, and which is like a top
Hmm.
institution in India. And then you move to US, right? Doing research, and you have seen the research culture in India. And you're talking about,
Hmm.
as we are on the topic of funding. In the start of the interview, we did talk a little bit about the funding in India is very scarce.
Yeah.
If I today ask you, like a PhD in India and a PhD in
Hmm.
US, how
Yeah.
will you weigh them one against the other?
I'll stick to math because I know in biology it doesn't even compare because the tools are so different. India doesn't have some tools, which means you can have 1,000 times more productivity. So that keeping that aside, in math, I don't think it matters that much. Like in specifically my abstract math field doesn't matter that much because you can do it anywhere.
Yeah,
The only difference that it makes is how many connections you have. Uh, in India, there's a bunch of places where things happen, but it is unfortunate that the recognition isn't that much, right? If I am at a US university, I can get to go to more conferences. More people recognize the university. Even though when I was in India, I didn't recognize the university. The first time I saw the name, I was like, oh, I've never heard of this place. Similarly, right? Whenever US people look at India, they're like, I have never heard of this place. They might know the one or two people over there, but not really, right? So, but here it breaks the ice easily. I can be like, oh, I'm from this university. I work with this person. They're like, oh, then I know you. And then you can sort of make connections much more easily. So in that sense, PhD in the US definitely gives you a social networking edge, like a networking edge much better. And in my field, I don't think I would have really lost anything.
Hmm.
I think a PhD would have been the same. I would have just had a different social life
Also,
academically.
yeah, it means in the I also want to know in the terms of the culture, you know,
Hmm.
dealing with people in
Yeah,
US, I'm sure would be different than how you deal with people or your supervisors in India. I want
true.
to ask this question.
Hmm.
You mentioned in your interview that you went to a supervisor and showed your YouTube video, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's completely, depending upon the individual that you are dealing with.
Hmm.
But
Correct. Yeah, 100%.
the
But
fact that even this idea came to you that I will go to my supervisor and show him this video.
yeah,
Will this idea occur to you if you were doing a PhD in India?
the people who do the stuff that I do, yes,
Okay.
likely. I met them, so they are like nice people. I might be open to showing them what I've done.
Yeah.
Uh, and like offbeat stuff. I have also heard horror stories in India. The whole shebang of bring me my tea sort of supervisors. I But for example, if you're in like a research institute, like there's in Institute of Mathematical Sciences, there's Chennai Mathematical Institute, which is good, of course. ISERS, IISc, NCBS. Dot when you are at like a national lab, when you're at like a research institute, the culture is often very strongly studying and research focused. So everybody, also the people who are there, have often been people who have been to other countries.
Yeah.
And so there is a mishmash of a culture.
Yeah.
So they know maybe what research in other countries look like, what good things we should take from them. So it ends up being that most people in those places do care very strongly about the subjects themselves. It's not just about the degree, it is honestly about talking to each other. And so, those in that way, yes, the cultures have been very nice where I have been.
I mean,
And if anybody is considering IISER Pune, I think IISER Pune is, at least in my time, is an incredible place to do research.
that's
It
awesome.
has a nice, yeah, nice math department. There are other, you know, IMSC, CMI. I've heard good things, but there are, I've also not heard good things about some very famous institutes in India and
Oh,
how they have 12-hour classes.
okay.
So, not taking any names. But so you should always do your research before you go into things.
Okay.
And as we talked about, finding your supervisor, making sure your personality matches with them,
Mm.
extremely important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since we are just weighing a PhD in India and in USA, the thing I want to also know is, if in considered in terms of money, okay?
Mm.
So I don't know if you would prefer India or USA, or is it the same? The pay scale is the same.
I do believe the pay scale is the same unless you have like a good fellowship.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, so roughly it's like 30 to 40,000
Hmm.
per month is what a person doing a PhD gets paid. If you have PMRF, which I don't know if it exists anymore, that goes to like
Yeah.
80-ish, I think 80, 90. So it is pretty good. Uh, but I think I might even think that 30,000 might be good in rupees when you are. But but the thing that is good here is whatever my savings are, those savings are worth way more in India
Yeah, that's right.
because of just how the conversion with dollar and Indian rupee makes. And I live in a town where the rent is not super high.
Hmm.
The groceries are also like fine. And I'm a kind of person who doesn't really spend a lot on things.
Yeah.
I get like, spend like once on a trip, once on an electronic item. That's my thing for the year. So I'm not really spending any
Yeah.
continuous amount of money. So I can have a bunch of savings, and that is more if I go back to India.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
like, it's
yeah, you can invest. You can invest or maybe have some savings by the end of your PhD doing outside, or maybe not.
exactly. Yeah.
Sense, yeah. To you,
Hmm.
since you are just in your, second last year, and maybe you'll be defending next year. And what do you think is a successful PhD? And what is the thing that you would not have developed, or any skill that you would not have developed if not for your PhD? That is like, I wouldn't give up this skill for anything in the world.
Hmm. What skill wouldn't I develop? There is one that comes to mind, but I don't know. Actually, no. Uh, so PhD to me has been sort of a culmination of how everything in my life, right? I was interested in math, then I actually tried to get good at math so
Yeah.
that I could carry that interest with me. Uh, I remember the first time when I did not understand something in math and I freaked out, went to my prof. I was like, why is this happening? It was like, read the book, do a bunch of problems. Uh, and I think those are sort of the things that the PhD always has been building towards. I don't believe it's like a very separate aspect of my life. Right?
Okay.
It is me trying to take all of myself and trying to work towards something. So for me, a successful PhD is, does this feel like a part of your life? Is this something that, not something, oh, I, for example, if I make a painting, I would, I mean, of course, I would make a bad painting, but also the painting would sort of be a separate thing from my life because, like I sort of took a painting detour and then
Yeah.
went on to do other things. But for a PhD, that it doesn't feel like that. It's not something that I did, right? It's a natural conclusion of what I have been building my life towards. And so how much does the PhD feel like a part of you? And that ties into your question of what skills do you learn? I can list out some of the skills I learned and then see which ones are more important. Uh, so first of all, one of the things that you learn is to work with people. You have to work with people, you have to resolve differences, no matter how great people are, no matter uh, how much you agree with them, sometimes you will not agree. So you have to figure out, and you have to figure that out professionally. Right? There's no way I can start yelling at my advisor. So figuring that part out is important. And just forming collaborations, knowing when is it a good time to start working with people.
Mm.
Like I talk to a person, I'm like, oh, we share interests. So should we start working? Do we have a problem to work out? All of these things, finding good problems, finding good problems, all of the asking good questions aspect of it, extremely important. This is currently a contender for a skill that I am now developing. Yeah, developing social aspect, that's the first thing.
Yeah.
The academic aspect is asking good questions. And asking good questions, I can ask. Everybody can ask a good question because there's so many questions to ask. Uh, More precisely, asking a good question that is tractable is very important. So sometimes and phrasing a question properly. What does it mean for you to actually understand something? So if I look at a proof or if I look at a certain theorem that I haven't seen before and trying to get an understanding of it, if I then I would be like, oh, what can I do with this? Can I extend this? And what does that precisely mean? Just nailing that down, I don't think I had that skill before starting my PhD. And I think I have gotten pretty good at it. So, there is, I want to ask a question about how can I express this thing in pictures, then I can ask a bunch of people. There is like a whole Discord group, and then I can ask this with people. People talk about it. I get some insights. I figure out how to do some things. So, yeah, just developing this thing of there are no questions like roughly, but like you sort of close your eyes and you want to get like the fly with the chopstick sort of thing. Developing that vibe, that is, I think, a skill that I am glad I have sort of, honed. Um, yeah. Also, I think one very small thing is as a mathematician, you also develop really strong logic skills, which
Mhm.
is just a byproduct of what you do.
Yeah.
Because you have to argue, you have to do logic, which also means I have good real life logic skill.
Okay.
Uh, I don't fall into something like a converse error, like, a a converse error will be like, this place is bad because it doesn't have pizza, and so You would think, oh, every place that doesn't have pizza must be bad, but that's not
Yeah.
the correct thing, right? So these sort of convers, and this is a stupid example, but these sort of converse errors are everywhere.
Yeah.
You, this is how most politicians run on,
Basically,
right? They use,
prejudices, right? So you don't
yeah,
fall for prejudices.
prejudice. Yeah, a lot of prejudice is rooted in this strong converse error. So in general, I think I have a good and background of logic, which just comes with doing math. So I'm glad at least I have that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the end of it, but I can just tell you how happy I felt about this conversation.
Hmm.
Because as I mentioned
I'm
you,
glad. Yeah.
the interview, and I'm also mentioning it now again, that for the first time, I'm hearing a person talking with so much passion, so much respect for the research, even after all these years when they have been into it.
Mhm.
I feel really good about it. That you hold on to your interest, you hold on to your passion. And now I know that why is this like that? Why people from some field are so done and why people from some are still holding on to what they do. Now I can realize the difference. And if not for a conversation with you, I don't think I would have ever, realized it. So thank you so much. Thank you really so much
Yeah.
for
Thank
being
you for doing it too.
and
Yeah. The questions were wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah.